Welcome into Point Blank, brought to you by Fitz Roofing. I am Brandon Strange of Sports Map Houston. He is Joel Blank of ESPN Houston. How about that? Welcome in, Joel. Let's talk some Texans. Big news going around today is that the Texans are meeting with Louis Riddick, and most know him as an analyst for Monday Night Football and draft coverage on ESPN. Riddick was also the director of pro personnel at Philly alongside Andy Reid. So he should have a pretty good feel for Andy Reid and the relationship there, and also probably a good feel for Eric Bieniemy since he's working with Andy Reid. Is it fair to assume Riddick might have a better working knowledge of how much of that magic from the Chiefs is coming from Reid versus Bieniemy?
I think assuming that they've had a good relationship and there's a reason why they were working side by side in Philadelphia, there's no reason not to believe that Louis Riddick and Andy Reid can talk freely and openly. And especially Andy Reid seems like the kind of guy that's all about getting his assistants promoted. We look at Matt Nagy, who went from under the Andy Reid coaching tree to the head coaching job for the Bears. And it seems like the same could be said of Eric Bieniemy. Reid wants him to succeed. So I think that the fact that not only does Louis Riddick know Andy Reid, but as long as that relationship was solid, that's a great conversation or conversations to have. And if you're a Texans fan, that's a reason to be really encouraged because he has relationships, both because of his knowledge in weekly talking to every team in the league, basically, when doing ESPN work. He knows the college game from having to break it down for ESPN. And he has relationships from his two previous jobs in Philadelphia in the front office, as well as I think it was Washington. And his time as a player. So he's got a guy that's in the know that continues to stay with his finger on the pulse of the NFL today. It's got to be a huge positive for an organization that drastically needs someone with those kind of connections and experience in the position of general manager.
I want to ask you about kind of that Riddick and Bieniemy dynamic there. But before we do that, why don't you give us a word from Fitz Roofing?
Yeah, we love the people at Fitz Roofing. They're great because they take care of Houstonians every single day. Whether for your business or your house, there's only one place to call when you're dealing with anything that has to do with your roof. It's Fitz Roofing. And they're also going to do a free, no obligation inspection free today. All you got to do is call them. 832-521-3001. It's Fitz Roofing, making a difference one home at a time.
If the Texans do end up hiring Riddick and Bieniemy, should there be any concern from Texans fans that the Texans could make the same mistake that they made with the Belichick coaching tree, which was they put a lot of stock in the Belichick coaching tree with O'Brien and Crennel and those guys? Could the Texans find themselves in a similar mistake putting too much stock in the Andy Reid coaching tree?
They could, but I don't think that it has the report card that the Belichick coaching tree has. And I think that from an Andy Reid perspective, you look at, say, with the Belichick coaching tree, and you look at what's happened with Matt Patricia is one thing, because he's a defensive guy. But when you look at the situation when Josh McDaniels went to Denver, you can't run the same system as the Patriots run if you have Tim Tebow as opposed to Tom Brady. The good thing about the Texans situation is there's no more ideal fit to run a Eric Bieniemy, Andy Reid system than Deshaun Watson, because not only did they come out in the same draft, but when you think about all their attributes and all the skill sets that they bring to the table, sure, Mahomes might be a little bit above Deshaun Watson, but with everything that Deshaun Watson brings to the table, Eric Bieniemy's got to go, hey, with all the different setbacks I might have because of the lack of draft picks and some of the cap issues early on with the Texans, the one thing I do know is I don't have to try and build a system around players that I'm not familiar with building a system around. I've got a guy that kind of mirrors the guy that I just got done working with and had a ton of success with. Why wouldn't I want to work with that guy again? I can fit some of the other pieces around him as time goes by, but the most important position that I'm dealing with as an offensive guy is quarterback, and I got a quarterback in Houston that's real close to the guy that I've been dealing with in Mahomes in Kansas City.
If the Texans cannot get, let's say they hire Riddick, but cannot land Bieniemy, is Louis Riddick the kind of name and the kind of brand that would bring, does it have enough cachet to it to lure in other big, high-profile coaching candidates?
I would like to think so because of his high-profile stature on ESPN and the fact that a lot of people have gotten real familiar with Louis Riddick and made him a household name when in the past he probably wouldn't have been if he didn't have this job. And I think that helps him. It's kind of like the new modern way of looking at it. Mike Mayock, who was on NFL Network and was breaking down talent, but people knew his name because of the fact that he did a lot of draft coverage and he did a lot with personnel. Lo and behold, the Raiders make him their general manager to work with John Gruden. And though they got off to a little bit of a rocky start and got criticized because they traded Khalil Mack, what they've done and how quickly they've turned that program around does nothing but help the case for a Louis Riddick, because he can come in and whether he gets Bieniemy or not, he knows that he has contacts and relationships with people that either are going to get him the guy that he wants or put him in touch with guys that can do what he wants to do so that they get this thing going in the right direction. I like the fact that the comparison, Brandon, would be John Dorsey. He's a guy that built the Chiefs to the point where they won the Super Bowl a few years ago and was responsible for most of those players. Then he built the Cleveland Browns, which you're watching do great things this year, from Baker Mayfield, from trades, from the draft. But he made one bad mistake, and it was Freddie Kitchens. You don't have to worry about an old school guy like John Dorsey and a guy that could swing for the fences and hit it every time except for one, and that one cost you a bunch. You got a newfound guy in Louis Riddick who is all about how to do it the right way, the modern way, and then can call on those resources and those contacts and those relationships to get him the people that he needs to execute that plan. I like it. I like it a lot.